structurally, when I think about artificial intelligence, there is a clear distinction between computation and between imagination. So I think this is where, let's say, humans and artificial intelligence clearly diverge. And one has, so they're both sitting at two extremes. Once artificial super intelligence is being developed, it will sit at one extreme, which is the computational one, and humans will sit at the far end, which is the imagination. And uh, you can think about this in terms of flatland, let's say, versus Escher hyperbolic spaces. So one sits in a very one-dimensional space, although it is, highly vehiculated that actually artificial intelligence, um, because is inherently mathematical, has infinite dimensions. I think that's true, but what's happening is that being a simulation, being, you know, constrained to specific structural uh, types of knowledge, I do think it's actually into one single dimension or two or whatever, very low dimensional due to the actual constraints of the geometry of data. But that's a different topic. So at the opposite extreme sits human experience, human knowledge, which is inherently hyperbolic, let's say, or even beyond that. All of these curved spaces that artificial intelligence can only project, much as we project, 3D into 2D and into worlds and so forth. So we do have to keep in mind that all of these dimensions or representations that might seem multi or if with infinite dimensions, they're still projections uh, on specific types of screens, let's say, of perception, of which AI can easily simulate and fool us, let's say, in uh, giving it more anthropomorphic values and properties, so making it more human, more uh, more humane.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Dream Wonders series on the Mindflex podcast. Well, when we talk about AGI and superintelligence, most conversations stay on the surface. Bigger models, more data, faster hardware. But beneath all that, a quieter and deeper question is asking to be heard. What is a mind really? What is this strange thing that we call consciousness, and how does it carve patterns into reality? Well, if we don't understand that, then superintelligence is just a louder echo of our own confusion. And today I have as guest Tib Roibu, who is a consciousness researcher whose breakthrough theory, called Polynon, is poised to address exactly this. So take a notebook because this conversation is going to be very, very important. Welcome, Tib, uh, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It was wonderful and quite surprising to meet you at the Science of Consciousness conference this year in Barcelona. That is a very prestigious conference. Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff are actually the originator of this amazing yearly forum, which goes on for, decades. And you presented your breakthrough theory framework. I do not know how to call it yet. We will see. Polynon as a geometry for living patterns, where behavior is what happens when deeper geometric constraints organize and reconfigure a system, and where mind emerges from that very geometry. I mean, I hope I understood it correctly because it's kind of for me, yeah, a totally different way to look at consciousness and a complete paradigm shift. So let's start with the origins. From what I read, uh, Polynon is a foundational geometric model of the mind. Can you take us back to the moment that this idea first crystallized for you?
Sure,
How,
that's a good start. Well, I don't think you can come across like that. I think it's an evolution that happens. So it wasn't like a serendipitous moment where I just got it. Although I did have multiple serendipitous moments, and I think they all together form this theory. But there are some critical stages, let's say, in the evolution of the polynomial that I can kind of share with you. And I think the first one begins more than 10 years ago in 2014 when I started a project called Geometry Matters. And I started looking into various aspects of perception, cognition, everything that deals with geometry in a very broad sense. And this included sacred geometry, occult, various symbolic ways of representing um, just general experience, religious accounts, psychedelic experiences, and so forth. And the more years have passed, the more I understood that there is a common language between them, and eventually this language was very good described by, at least for me, by German idealists like Kant. He was talking about the a priori geometry, not explicitly Fichte and others of this kind. So basically, I really understood that the behind this perception we're having, there's this kind of substrate which is geometric or has geometric properties. So that led me to kind of put aside everything I knew up to that point and try not to be biased because I was going into this abstract realm and I was trying to envision something that, as Kant calls it, is beyond perception. So I was trying to think of the thing in itself without having a perceptual account or a perceptual experience of it. So I kind of chose to not further do research, very granular research, let's say, in how this geometry can be developed, which allowed me to be, let's say, in a very paradoxical or meditative, contemplative state of mind. And at some point, it just clicked that I should just flip everything inside my head. And, if the mind is usually um, is used to experience timeline linearly, then the polynon must be nonlinear. Or if this, then that. So I really understood how to play with perceptual boundaries and with this kind of um, non-traditional ways of explaining things through paradox, through inverted logics, let's say, and all of these hyperbolic mind games. And eventually, I came up to the conclusion of the Polynon and how it's currently proposed.
yes, and I think your background, because we didn't get to talk about that at all, as a designer and your mindset as a futurist also helped you. So, first of all, as a designer, of course, I observe form and I create form, and I think that helped you very much in that. So, if someone is listening who has never heard of cognitive geometry and these kind of concepts, as is the case with many of our listeners, how would you explain in simple terms, in plain language, what the polynomial actually is and what it means to say that, let's say, mind is structure?
Yeah, basically, the Polynon is a tool for self knowledge, and more than that, is a tool for transcendence. So the idea behind it is that once you understand that everything you see has a parity of one to one, let's say, within your mind, and that reality is not just something that sits outside of the mind, but it's an construct that's part of the mind, and this is something that's been discussed or analyzed for millennia basically. So it's not something new. It's just a very analytic, let's say, proposition of it. So basically, once you understand that there's uh, properties of the mind that you can see outside of your mind, and there are properties outside of the mind that you can see inside, so there's no clear boundary between them. Once you look at how the structure of data, how the structure of information flows from one medium to another, which are traditionally considered as separate if you are a dualist. But once you really look at how this information flows from one another, you get to see, this continuum, which essentially is our own experience of it, and even further, it is one single conscious experience that we all have, and it's essentially monistic in essence. It's fundamental, it's non-divisible, and it's like a collective common ground that we are part of and we also subjectively experience. So you cannot escape this kind of philosophical, I'll say, babble to some, to have a funny way of saying it, but yeah, there's there's no distinction between the observer and the observed, and there's plenty of clever mechanisms to play around and try and make sense of this reality we're experiencing, technology. So we see plenty of these philosophical properties, let's say, within technology. So you're most familiar with the holon, which is a particular entity that's part whole but part fragment of the same entity. So uh, I'm really interested in seeing how these properties of the mind, let's say, or cognition, which is more, let's say, scientific, are seen or are part of this kind of substrate that we call reality. And the Polynon does that in a very simple way, but of course in a very complicated way as well. Once you go granularly in this.
Okay, so so you mentioned transcendence. Of course, this is a concept which the person on the street I don't think is thinking too often about, and most people are not aware about the concepts which you vehiculated here. Although I told you to explain in simple terms, but yet you explained in simple terms. However, unfortunately, yes, in our society today. Um, the education system is not teaching us about transcendence. On the contrary, it's a mechanistic system which is very linear. The economy is mechanics. Everything is completely, and I would say false, yes, represented. Because you mentioned transcendence, I'd like to dig a bit deeper into that. So let's now address the nominal aspect. How does it sit in relation to, I mean, your theory, yes? In this regard relative to, let's say, panpsychism, analytic idealism, maybe even physicalism. So where are you
Mhm.
on the spectrum?
Basically, the main proposition of the Polynon is a non-dual monistic aspect. So that means consciousness is treated as a fundamental substance, but at the same time we have two valences of it. One is traditional, considered material or physical, and the other is non-material, um, you know, metaphysical or whatever. So both aspects that we kind of see as dividing us in between two sides, they're actually sides of the same coin, which is uh, postulated here as being consciousness. Now there is a mechanism for it. It's developing currently. It's a very specific way in looking at how consciousness, diffracts or becomes these two valences of which we are observers but also part of. So that's one one way to look at the polynon. So it's not trying to divide. Furthermore, I think we already have everything in place in terms of answers. We just have to really look at what's being done today, and just ask the right questions, let's say. So with this respect, it's very um, aligned with Bernardo Kastrup's analytic idealism. So, consciousness is fundamental, and I have been looking at what the science says about this. How can we have a scientific approach in answering this? So, basically, tackling the hard problem of science, and all of these particular questions that come into play when consciousness or even the observer is brought in. Now, of course, we can talk about the nature of the observer. It can be nature with cognition, nature um, with conscious experience, without conscious experience. So perhaps in some of these models, current models, the observer is more uh, it's a less traditional type of observer. Perhaps it's just a perceptual mechanism, which, from my perspective, artificial intelligence is uh, is now. So they have this kind of uh, cognition assigned to their structural properties that can be, defined as perception, but not necessarily as cognition or consciousness. But that's a different debate. So you mentioned panpsychism as well. I think that's a very um, it's a tricky question, but I do postulate somewhere that not everything is conscious, but everything is within consciousness. So while a single entity or particle cannot ever be conscious because it doesn't have the structural necessities for that, let's say, it can be within consciousness given the environment in which that specific entity or particle exists. So there's a lot of postulates and axioms that can further allow us to understand how this might work actually in practice. And the Polynon has that in its structures based on very specific types of polynons. So depending on how many edges a polynon has, there's multiple properties given to the environment, to the possible entities, and so forth. And this brings me to the previous question related to the noumena, and how does this influence? It's really it's fundamental to the way the Polynon works because it allows us to operate outside of traditional knowledge or outside of human perception, let's say, outside of human imagination, I would even go. So that means working with paradoxes, working with non-linearity of time, and of course, it's hard to uh, create models that do that, but there's actually a way, and I hope that once I publish these geometries, that it makes sense for everybody, not just me. But I think as taxonomy, the nominal can be um, very analogous to the Platonic realm. So you see, I've been looking at Michael Levin's work with his anthrobots, and how he chooses the Platonic realm as possible source for his findings. And of course, he's not making any ontological commitment to the Platonic. He's very specific and just telling us that look, there's something beyond there that informs these anthropods and these findings, and we need to take them into account. And I think the Polynon really comes into this space and tells us that, for example, whatever behavior we have as humans, as anthropods, or as any kind of entity, this behavior is informed or even defined by the surrounding environment. And Of course, this taps into a lot of philosophical issues like free will, for example, but we'll leave that aside. But I think what the Polynons proposition eventually is that you have to look at things that sit beyond the perception, sit beyond the boundaries you set, even through mathematical formalism or through whatever you choose to define that specific boundary. Even language can be a boundary, and it's just a you know it's just a commitment to something, but eventually that is through our own perception, through our own experience of it. And the Polynon tries to make a very clear distinction between these two realms, the known and the unknown, the uncertain and the certain, the conditioned and the unconditioned, and so forth. And once you do that, I think you have much more freedom, especially freedom in terms of expressing what's currently being perceived. So I can express it through, various means of representation, symbolic, uh, metaphysic, biologic, depending on my own substrate or my own professional practice. But then, how does that how does what I represent looks like from the other side? So how does the represented see me, for example? Does it use the same language? Does it use the same formalism and so forth?
So, okay, let's move on. You mentioned so many things. I even don't know where to start. I mean, you said imagine what is outside of human imagination. So I'm like, and this ties in so well with language as a limiting factor, because language is only, at least springs from what we can imagine. And that is a clear boundary and limitation as well. And it also shows the limitation of LLMs, that they cannot really step outside and have imagination and help us really discover new things, or have a creativity which is beyond us. But I'd like to stay with this and see if we can actually, your overarching theory um, can help us step out and of the limitations of our current limitations, and help us imagine what is outside of human imagination. So, and you mentioned AI, of course, and I'd like to ask you a few things. But if you want to address this right now, I'll let you now. Otherwise, I can ask more. I mean, clarify the question more. What?
Yeah.
What
So one of the let's say research agendas of the Polynon is looking into how artificial intelligence deals with knowledge, and of course this comes with multiple avenues for research. So one is the actual structure of knowledge. So is this structure similar to how we compute or store knowledge and all that? Then can LLMs have self-awareness? All these properties like interoception, proprioception. What types of perceptions are they? Similar to humans and humans' cognition. And of course, there are similarities because it is to some extent it is a continuation of human cognition in a different realm. So it's a carbon copy, if you want, of human cognition. It may have evolved in its own structural properties, but it is still a continuation of our own image, let's say. So I'm very interested in how there's, what are the structural invariants between human cognition and artificial intelligence, and how can these be further used to, uh, you know, uh, build, to improve experience, to deploy new kind of technologies, new kind of architectures that can be seen in technology, in deep tech, and so forth. So that's one simple, let's say, aspect. A more complex aspect is looking at how various various frameworks, various because you talked about, you said something about language being a barrier. So I'm looking at how various, yeah, okay. So I'm interested in looking at various isomorphisms or homotopies between uh, structures of representations, frameworks. uh, how do we translate from one specific domain to another? How we translate from biology to physics? How we translate from human to artificial intelligence? And once you start looking at the underlying structure of data, of information, you start to tap into already established domains like geometric cognition, geometric deep learning. More familiar people are with graph networks, probabilistic representations of data, and all sorts of highly visual, let's say, domains that allows to really understand what's beneath it and kind of map it all and see connections, see various invariants, let's say, that uh, for some people those invariants become fundamental in themselves, and for some other people those are a very clear representation or a shadow, to use the actual terminology of Plato. So they're shadows of this Platonic realm, and they cannot ever be something fundamental. But that's a different aspect. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested in all sides of cognition, granular, holistic. How do we get from granular to holistic and back? So it's a top-down approach. It's a bottom-up approach as well. But I think even most than that, it's even an outside approach. So once I establish the boundaries between the two, I try to look at how does it look from an outside perspective. How does it look from like I said, outside imagination, where we don't have space time, we don't have traditional structures, we don't have uh, Hilbert spaces or whatever constructs that allow us in first place to actually represent those in those boundary, in those specific conditions.
Totally, totally. And speaking of cognition, you use this term of cognitive gravity across your work. And I just had conversation with a team which I met also at the Consciousness Science Conference, and they actually were talking, and of course they are modeling thoughts as attractors, and they also proved that thoughts are physical. And so I want to, kind of ground it a bit and go a bit deeper into AI, AGI with this, how do we understand this cognitive gravity in practice? I mean, would it be helpful for, let's say, when we design AI, AGI architectures, agents, for goals, values, attention? Could they be designed as gravitational attractors in your cognitive geometry, or how would that
Mhm.
apply?
I think so this is already hard coded and embedded. Uh, we
But
already have a very good understanding of how
by
gradient
you,
descent
I
works,
mean,
how
sorry, hard coded by you or in
no,
general?
just in general by the
Oh,
industry,
okay,
yes.
okay.
So, the attractor term is well known. There's established architectures, Bayesian architectures, active inferences, and so forth. So, what cognitive gravity tries to establish is, first of all, uh, a very clear understanding that all this is happening within a cognitive substrate. So it tries to underpin the cognitive nature of all this computation. So with it is with respect to consciousness, it is some kind of idealistic approach, but it does try to keep it neutral. Let's say, so we do have uh, something to work with. But now, so artificial intelligence already uses cognitive gravity, but it's a hidden in plain sight, as I call it, science, because we have all of these. patches and all of these properties of all of these domains, but they're not brought together under one single um, framework, one single, I wouldn't call it science, but a topic of interest, let's say. So yeah, I mean, everything that deals with computation, I think in my perspective, it will eventually deal with cognition, and that kind of revolves around spatial and temporal dynamics. So you cannot, at least from my perspective, you cannot put aside spatial and temporal properties if you deal with computation, and this is where cognitive gravity comes into play, actually. So computation happens in time, and it also happens in space, which brings with it several properties of, or several laws of physics, let's say. And you can look at it from a quantum physics, from a quantum mechanics perspective. You can look at it from a general relativity perspective. But no matter how you do it, you always uh, come down to specific properties, some of which are gravity related. And gravity traditionally would tell you that it is the curvature of space-time that allows entities, or bodies, to have mass. So you mentioned that team that considered or showed that thoughts have physical mass or physical properties. Uh, when you look at it from a cognitive perspective, this shows you that space-time being within mind, everything that within it has cognitive gravity, because it is a cognitive experience, a cognitive process, and so forth. So I hope it's not too vague, but it is an actual mechanism that is proposed, and it's really looking at how physics can be translated into this kind of cognitive computations, cognitive properties.
So yeah, because you mentioned this is kind of hidden in plain sight somehow in already existing AGI AI systems. So, but the question is, could your, let's say, call it Polynon-based AI AGI infer hidden geometric structures from behavior rather than just learning
Mhm.
statistical patterns? Uh, what would be the
Yes.
contribution? Okay.
Yeah, so first of all, what I'm working with right now is just, it's an experiment, it's a postulate, even. So it's a general ontology, and it's not trying to establish AGI or conscious AI, but is trying to establish what are the postulates for this, and it's trying to automate said postulates and said structures. And um, it is one of the main goals to infer all of these hidden behaviors, because it starts with them from. So it doesn't start with any traditional structures. It starts with paradox. It starts with um, effectively with it starts with nothing. So the question or the framework this kind of automated system tries to achieve, or the Polynon in essence, is show you how we get nothing, how we get something from nothing. And it sounds very vague and very abstract, but what it draws down to is how uh, how can something be observed, what is the nature of the observer, and what is the nature of the observed. Well, is there an ontological difference between them, and what is the structure between them, because that structure is the representation that we see in models, in representations in physics, and in the data of artificial intelligence, and so forth. So the larger the gap between the observer and the observed, the larger and the more granular the representation and the perceived or the experienced reality. And this is where the Polynon comes in and goes even further and tells you, look, there's no difference between the observer and the observed, actually. If consciousness is fundamental and everything is within consciousness, and all this and all that, then you have to start with a paradox postulate, and with this kind of non-identity postulate with continuum of experiences, and this is what's trying to being. This is where automating this kind of framework, I hope, helps uncover some of these hidden behavioral aspects, or let's say Platonic shadows that are informing or that are sitting in plain sight. Let's say.
Amazing, amazing. So, when I mean, this is a qualitative jump, yes, in how we look at the world in general, yes, and how we approach everything from what you say here. And I think obviously many things in this regard are hidden in plain sight because they are in our blind spot. We don't see them because we don't think in those fundamental terms. So we have to come back to kind of first principles here. So if we are, for example, when we talk about superintelligence, again, yes, coming back to our main topic here for our community, yeah, we often imagine more data, more of the same intelligence, just faster and bigger, and we're gonna get to to this superintelligence. So from your first principles, let's call it like that, because you said postulates, yes, perspective with Polynon, how would you redefine superintelligence? If I may, sorry to ask you, maybe you didn't think of that, but I think it's an important question of our era.
I think so. Structurally, when I think about artificial intelligence, there is a clear distinction between computation and between imagination. So I think this is where, let's say, humans and artificial intelligence clearly diverge. And one has, so they're both sitting at two extremes. Once artificial super intelligence is being developed, it will sit at one extreme, which is the computational one, and humans will sit at the far end, which is the imagination. And you can think about this in terms of flatland, let's say, versus Escher hyperbolic spaces. So one sits in a very one-dimensional space, although it is, highly vehiculated that actually artificial intelligence, because is inherently mathematical, has infinite dimensions. I think that's true, but what's happening is that being a simulation, being, you know, constrained to specific structural uh, types of knowledge, I do think it's actually into one single dimension or two or whatever, very low dimensional due to the actual constraints of the geometry of data. But that's a different topic. So at the opposite extreme sits human experience, human knowledge, which is inherently hyperbolic, let's say, or even beyond that. All of these curved spaces that artificial intelligence can only project, much as we project, 3D into 2D and into worlds and so forth. So we do have to keep in mind that all of these dimensions or representations that might seem multi or if with infinite dimensions, they're still projections uh, on specific types of screens, let's say, of perception, of which AI can easily simulate and fool us, let's say, in uh, giving it more anthropomorphic values and properties, so making it more human, more uh, more humane. But yeah, the postulate here would be that there's a clear distinction between the two. That doesn't mean there aren't ways to cross borders. So I think the more we look into quantum biology, um, quantum artificial intelligence, when you look at various, when you look at neuromorphic structures or any kind of new technologies that allow us to move past beyond these structures, then we may possibly have bridges between the two worlds. and that's when everything will become even fuzzier than it's probably the current state. So I won't necessarily commit to any kind of argument in favor of specific levels uh, of cognition, but it is clear that uh, they are becoming more and more powerful in at least simulating. And um, this also brings us to ethical AI, and to how do we deal with this kind of power. Let's say, how is it going to affect the way we teach, the way we learn, how it will affect us as human beings. And uh, there's there's of course sides of this. There's a very negative side that kind of took over the discussion. AI is bad, AI is this, and all that. But then there is a positive side to it, and you can look at it through um, a very, of course, a very optimistic lens, but also through a very philosophical one. And I can give you an example in terms of considering it just as a natural progression of human evolution. So if this is a fourth or whatever number of uh, industrial revolution, then that means we have already embedded artificial intelligence in our core structure as human beings, and what we're seeing actually is just an unveiling of this structure um, into let's say common knowledge or public becoming a public access. But it has been uh, has been around for 40 to 50 years, so it's nothing new actually. So if this is just a natural evolution and we have to deal with it as we have with already existing technological structures, then that means we're going to be fine. So we're going to understand what's the actual role of this technology, how can it further enable us in becoming better human beings, into having better human experiences. So okay, we have to be very careful in understanding the negative aspects, how it is currently used for political purposes, for various nefarious aspects in social or politics, economics, and so forth. But I think it would be helpful, and healthy as well, to keep a positive conversation going as well.
Yes, totally. And of course, this evolutionary lens on superintelligence, this is also our approach at SingularityNet. And um, I mean, our CEO, Dr. Ben Goertzel, released a book called The Consciousness Explosion, which talks exactly about that. But there's a lot of positive discussion in this regard also in other circles. Like the idea is to regard the superintelligence as an opportunity to transform our species, to transcend, as you said, because it started from transcendence, from our limitations, which are the negative aspects which you mentioned, and what do we want to preserve in the future uh, from humanity into a worthy successor, right? And look at these AGIs as mind children, as Dr. Ben Goertzel is calling them as well, and nurture them so that they embody the best of humanity. So I'm there with you in this evolutionary transcendence and transformation. And you also mentioned bridges. But and you mentioned Escher as well, and I have, of course, the Bible here, my Bible, Gödel, Escher, Bach by Hofstadter, which, of course, I mean, when I talk to you, or when I listen to you, this comes to mind very, very quickly, because it shows also, yeah, this bridge, many bridges actually. Um, which and as you say, yes, I mean, this is nothing new in this regard. Yeah, in a way, yes, but I mean, why didn't we pay attention? That's the question. So I think, from what I know, you are building something like a mind machine bridge, that is based on your Polynon theory. And I don't know if you want to talk about this recent Mahakala, or however you call it. I think it's also an interesting aspect uh, of the mind machine bridge, or however you want to call it.
Yes, that's one of the topics we talked about earlier, and Mahakala is my way of trying to automate the Polynon. So because it tackles into so many uh, aspects of reality and also in philosophy. So it it has this multi-dimensional property. It would be hard for me to keep going at some point. So I'm trying to establish an ontological core, let's say, which is uh, the most important in terms of how do we deal with knowledge itself. But then when looking at how does this core fare or compare with existing properties of reality, existing frameworks, existing fundamental laws of physics, and so forth, it would be useful to try and automate and speed that things up and uh, establish clear relations, graph networks and so forth, structures. So this is where Mahakala comes in, and Mahakala is an Indian entity. I really am drawn into, let's say, because of its particular properties. It's supposedly uh, the actual name means beyond time and death. So it's a very clever analogy to establish a computational model to which you give your, let's say, your biases, your perception, and your, structure or representation of reality, and it will give you back an answer that comes beyond those constraints, beyond those boundaries. So it's a philosophical inquiry into computational models, let's say. So it tries to uh, you know just pace around traditional symbolic computation and go into non-symbolic computation. So it's using geometry as actual cognition. So this is another postulate of the Polynon, that geometry is cognition, and it does take some mind bending and some going up the river to understand this. But I think the proposition is sound, and it makes sense once you allow your mind to go beyond these constraints that we have created with language, with actual representation. So representation becomes the limit of its own thing, of its own structure. So I think this is also what's happening here with Mahakala and with the Polynon. Uh, the boundary is the boundary, and perception is the boundary of perception, and so forth. So this is where I try to look at how can we embed these into computational models, but not with the purpose of achieving some kind of AGI or super intelligence, but in rather in showing us how can we benefit from unearthing these hidden isomorphisms or hidden structures or various relations between domains. How can we, perhaps instill or distill serendipitous moments, play around, just yeah, allow us to play with knowledge and be more, uh, free, because it will be so grounded in structure that it will allow us to, have a playful approach to knowledge. So this also comes back to the distinction between them, because if we allow a machine to be 100% computational and 100% um, embedded in drenched, let's say, in computation, then we can be humans, we can have experiences, and we can actually transcend this, everything that can be automated, let's say, everything that can be structural knowledge that we don't necessarily have to contain or you know use in every day, let's say.
And how would that influence, the structures in which we are living? Because they are definitely influencing us. I mean,
Mhm.
think of cities, right? It's we at least at SingularityNet, and it's one of my dreams as well. Like working at the nexus of technological innovation, where many technologies come together, this convergence, which people start to talk more and more about, in which you have these smart cities, but now, we want conscious cities. So I think you have some work in this regard as well. And the question is, uh, how do we, I mean, can we regard or can we design cities that are closer to our cognition, like they can become cognitive partners, not just simple infrastructure, like more alive? Maybe I'm going too far with my imagination, but I think you have some work on that.
Yes, so I don't think it's that far. I think it's already here, and we're ready to establish these kinds of structures. And yes, one of the ventures I started earlier this year, it's called Nomon, and it's postulated or is presented as the first cognitive gravity for future-proof environments. And what we're trying to do here is have a look at the built environment and really understand the trends that are happening right now. So you mentioned already conscious cities. There's also cognitive buildings, all sorts of cognitive systems, that already have, let's say, uh, various cognitive aspects through their uh, specific granular systems. Some of them can be holonic in essence. Some of them are just, because they use artificial intelligence, they will kind of bring into and embed cognitive processes. So what we're doing there is um, looking at the built environment and really make a change of how we build and how we build experiences. And one simple way in understanding the shift that's happening is understanding the change in paradigm. So, for example, uh, the proposition here, in order to build better experiences, we have to look at how we even use language. And for example, it's a shift from a function based paradigm to an outcome based paradigm. So instead of calling workspaces, which is the function, we are going to call them spaces for performance. A hospital becomes a space for restoration. Kindergarten becomes a space for play, and so forth. So this is a very human-centric approach and allows us to really understand the human nature of the built environment, and also that we built the environment to protect us in the first place, to allow us to have experiences and so forth. And uh, the actual terminology we use is cognitive spaces, and this is broadly, a taxonomy that allows us again to bring in together artificial intelligence, all of these holonic systems. So all of these top-down approaches or bottom-up approaches that are embedding various, biological properties or physical properties, and cognitive gravity as well. So um, I don't think we're far. And of course, this kind of evolution is not evenly distributed. So basically, there will be, let's say, cognitive cities or cognitive spaces, patches of them throughout the world. Other people might choose to just live without, any kind of wave interference, let's say, any kind of electromagnetism, and just be, uh, humans in nature, let's say, without any boundary in between them. And I think that's fine. Uh, so yeah, no one tries to make the best out of current technology, but also pushes further with specific foresight principles and of course, polynomial ontologies that are hard coded and embedded into the built environment.
Yes, and with these holonic aspects, of course, I mean, it helps us organize a distributed intelligence, yes, in certain patterns, nested hierarchies. But I think another aspect here, because of course, maybe my questions were too targeted to the technological aspects of your theory, but of course, also the integration with nature is I mean, this is much more fundamental. We forgot that that was actually the original project was integration of humanity with nature. Now we kind of forgot completely about that, and we live in a completely different world, destroying Gaia. So this is very relevant actually, and it is this branch now called symbiotic intelligence, and I think from what I understand, your theory definitely can help us with this integration as well. I don't not know if you want to say something about that because you mentioned this, reintegration with nature, but it's very necessary.
No, it is. I mean, um, just because we do things in a very physical or material way, just because we keep adding detail or granularity to this experience, that doesn't mean that it is incorrect, that it goes against our nature. I think uh, having both extremes is part of our nature as humans. We do want to keep pushing the boundaries of technology, pushing the boundaries of artificial intelligence. Otherwise we wouldn't have what we have today in terms of development. But we do need to keep, you know, to not lose sight of what is the core fundamental aspect of this experience. And I think this also speaks to, the traditional battle between physicalists and idealists to some respect. So I don't think that there's a bad narrative or negative narrative uh, that doesn't really allows us to be uh, true humans. I mean, I can just close my eyes and start meditate and put everything aside and just have 100% experience of my own consciousness. So that's always there, and no matter how many quantum effects are happening in science, or how further AGI goes and so forth. So I think we should keep pushing the boundaries of technology and find out what's out there for us. But also, don't forget that we're still, uh, we as humans and as the creator of technology, we're still part of these larger constructs that inform our experience and our decisions and so forth.
And which your theory is actually revealing the shape of this, if I may. So, you touched a bit on AI ethics, and that is, of course, a very well, I even don't know if it's resolved. It's a conundrum at the moment. Yeah, everybody is talking about it, but I mean, what does it mean, and so on and so forth. And this alignment, not to mention about alignment, there's so much confusion about alignment. And I think maybe the way in which you reveal behavioral patterns and the many other blind spots, I mean, in which your theory can reveal, uh, and including the new Holon 2.0, let's say, suggests that these constraints and boundaries and attractors can be encoded maybe directly into the geometry of cognition if we are to design these AIs. So the question is, do you think there is I mean, could alignment become a question of shaping curvature and attractors and whatever you use, whatever ingredients are in Polynon, rather than policing outputs, right? I mean, no, no, this AI is bad. Now don't do this, and it's like reinforcement learning. So how would that shift the paradigm? If I don't know if you thought of this, but I think it would be definitely a good research for you.
Yeah, I haven't gone that far, but just from the top of my head, I could just envision some kind of policies that inform AI decisions based on, um, let's say, memetics. I'll take a very specific example. So we look at culture, we look at memetics and how this informs uh, even political structures, and how does this then basically feed artificial intelligence knowledge? How does this appear then in future models and so forth? And I think if you look at it from a structural component, then it can reveal hidden biases or hidden uh, already hidden constraints or negative aspects that can be predefined or preempted from becoming a structural aspect of future AI models. So there's some kind of recursive loop that we can look at. I'm not sure if it answers your question, but yeah, it does come down to looking at structural properties of knowledge and how do they transform from one medium to another and come back to us to hit us back basically in a negative way.
Yes, I think it makes a lot of sense. And this brings me to a conversation which you had with the OODA guy, speaking of recursive loop and the OODA loop. And again, Hofstadter's I'm a strange loop. Because, yes, I mean, we have to identify these loops as patterns and see through them and see what do they mean, what do they reveal about what we do, right? So I think definitely the way in which your geometric, let's call it geometric frameworks, reveal these hidden patterns is very important. And I cannot but of course return to Gödel, Escher, Bach, because this is all about these patterns, right? And how they can be found. And retrieved over and over across disciplines, across biology and mathematics and art. And we cannot, I mean, in mechanistic way in which we live today, we are blind to that. And I think that is about to reveal a deeper truth, um, which takes me to, this cosmological aspect of your theory. Of course, we started with that, with the transcendence and the nominal, but I am wondering if using Polynon, we could reveal the patterns which are even more universal than the first principles we can grasp here on Earth. Like Ian McGilchrist and many others are postulating that there are patterns of beauty, goodness, and truth in the universe. And even Mike Levin, uh, who is much more a pragmatic guy, although also Ian is a medical doctor, he's talking about that. What would be? Do you think we can use your theory to maybe enable the ingression of patterns of beauty, goodness, and truth? This is more
Mhm.
like wishful thinking on my side. So sorry to put that on you, but I'm hoping.
No, I don't think it's useful thinking, but I do think that the more we discover, the more we're just moving the horizon. So this is something that's going to go ad infinitum in terms of exploration. So no matter how much we think we have figured things out, nature will keep on giving. So the polynon is inherently built in such a way that it allows this infinite loop between what we experience and what we keep discovering. So I hope it can allow us to further understand this Platonic triad, let's say, that you mentioned, that is inescapable from human frameworks. And yes, basically we have to understand that no matter how much we keep pushing, there's always going to be a boundary. And I think this is also the beauty of it, because it allows uh, it allows us to understand that just looking and having the experience of discovering is more than sufficient, let's say, to have a beautiful experience. And I think, yeah, purpose becomes a purpose in itself, let's say, to use it philosophically. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and this just brings me to, let's say, if we want to close our conversation, would be like, okay, so what does it all mean? Yeah, what is this Polynon, the meaning of your discovery? I don't know if you thought about that, but of course it's a valid question, right? What does it all mean for humanity, for the universe, for revealing truth? You mentioned the triad, so I think that would be one, yes. Although truth is embedded in kind of beauty, goodness, and truth. So what does
Yeah.
your discovery mean?
So, so basically, it all comes down to, I think, in my opinion, it comes down to two options. So once you understand how a thing works, uh, it either becomes more beautiful and more meaningful, or it either becomes, without purpose and uh, without an end to it. So there's a negative side to it once people understand how thing works. But I fall in the first side. So if I understand how thing works, it becomes more beautiful. I am more invested in that thing. So being part of it, it's a conscious decision to be part of it, and you know dealing with that thing and experiencing it. And I think this is a where the transcendence comes in, because if you we understand how reality works and how it's all an illusion, how it's all this kind of interface or whatever kind of taxonomy you want to use, then it allows you to understand why you're here, what is the intrinsic purpose of your experience, of your being. And it also comes with an intimate side. So, although it speaks very cosmological, let's say, or very holistic, how things work in general, it does allow you to have an intimate experience of reality, because it will try and show you how your own experience i- is defined by your subjectivity. So there are, outside constraints, there are physical laws, there are various structures that give you some kind of deterministic aspect, but you do have a free will of your experience, and you do have your own subjectivity, and there's no escaping this duality and this paradoxical aspect of it. So I think this is the actual transcendence and the actual, Gödel loop, to be more specific.
Yes, yes, the strange loop. Yes. So, thank you so much. Uh, before we leave you, Tib, because I assume you're very busy with all these projects rooted in your framework. For researchers, builders, and curious listeners who feel a resonance with your idea of cognition as geometry, what are the most meaningful ways to get involved? Are there specific a site or a way to contact you? What's the best way?
Uh, all my work is currently on polynons.com, and it's just free papers at the moment, so it's nothing too complicated. It's more white papers. So I have been working, for specific models for the past year. So the project is barely, let's say, represented by these papers, but they do give you, a high level overview of the postulates and the framework that I'm going to announce probably at the beginning of the next year. So go to the website, the papers are there, and links to the other projects as well. It's all
And
in there.
we will put the link in the
Thank you.
description, of course. Thank you so much, Tib, for this amazing
Thank you.
conversation. Like really changing completely perspectives. So this, for me, it was a eureka moment. Also now, but also when I first met you at the Science of Consciousness conference, because it reveals how pursuit of superintelligence is not just about building, a smarter other, but about learning to recognize the geometry of our own minds and how meaning curves our inner space, how attention creates gravity wells, how each of us is a local fold in a far larger field of awareness. And in that light, I think for me, the meaning of it all and the real breakthrough is not a machine that outthinks us, but a new coherence between what we call mind plexes at Singularity Net, and that is human consciousness, artificial cognition, and the living patterns which the universe shares. Because in that context, superintelligence stops being an arms race with humanity and with human intelligence and becomes a symmetry, a way of bringing our technologies into resonance with the deeper structures of mind and reality. And my hope is that conversations like this one, and especially the concrete work which Tib and his team is doing, they help us remember that we are not just user of intelligent systems. We are participants in a vast unfolding geometry of consciousness, and the shapes we choose to inhabit together will determine the kind of universe that we will inhabit as a humanity. So thank you so much, Tib. This was really mind blowing, no pun intended again. And okay, we look forward to see your progress.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward as well to seeing more and more of these conversations, as they are very useful for all of us,
Definitely,
not just
and
everyone.
I'm hoping that we will be working together on these mind plexes. So
Of course.
yes, that would be next natural step. Thank you.